And ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Two Schmoes Show, the only show on the internet where we are both schmoes and we are broadcasting some form of show. Very exciting, I know. I'm the infamous Orion, and I'm a schmo.
I'm Cairo. I'm also a schmo. We're true innovators.
True innovators. This show has more schmo representation than any other. We are truly ahead of our time.
Yeah.
Yes. Diversity matters, everybody. So, Mr. Chiral, how are you doing today?
I'm very tired.
Aren't we all?
It has been a draining week.
That's just living in the U.S. like the last 3 years, I'll say. I'll give us a little bit of pre-COVID time, too, because we all knew it was bullshit beforehand.
It's been longer than that, honestly.
Yeah.
It's just, I don't know. Hindsight, makes it look worse than it is, or than it looked at the time, right? But, looking back, there's a lot of stuff that we probably should have seen for what it was that we didn't.
Of course.
And people did call it out at the time, to be fair. It's just that the majority didn't listen.
No, we were too busy playing Flappy Bird.
Ever since, 1776, it's been kind of downhill.
Hey, I will argue 1812 we weren't doing that bad.
1812, yeah. There's a couple of bright spots.
Do we need to make an American highlight reel?
Be pretty good.
Shouldn't we? Let's go. Everybody, welcome to our top 10 list of the top 10 moments in American history. Number 10, 9/11. Number 9, Vietnam. Number 8, Ronald Reagan was nominated for presidency. Elected as president, my apologies. No, fuck it. Number 8, Ronald Reagan was nominated for presidency. Number 7, Ronald Reagan was elected for presidency. Number 6, Stranger Things came out. Number 5, I can't think of more things that are just overly baited nostalgia that seemed like better ideas at the time. Yeah.
I'm flipping through here because I realized, spending all this time getting ready for the show here, I don't have a single actual story about the British Prime Minister. And I'm on the BBC's website right now trying to find stories for it, and there's not that much there either.
To be
They
fair,
really don't want to talk about it.
Yeah. What do you think made... Okay, for those of you not in the know, British Prime Minister Liz Truss, was that her name?
Liz Truss.
Liz Truss. Resigned after 44 days in office.
Yep.
Which...
In spectacular fashion, on her 43rd day, she described herself as a fighter and that she would not be going anywhere. And then on the 44th day, she fucking tailed it out of there.
Did she ever give a reason?
It's incredible.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so here's the thing. Typically in British politics, they both have general elections that broadly determine the makeup of their government. But the prime minister itself, from what I understand, is never directly elected by the people. The prime minister is selected by the parliamentary members that constitute the majority party. So currently, the majority party in the UK is a right-wing coalition of what would be considered more moderate right, all the way to the extreme right. They sort of came together in their love for capitalism and hatred of the common man and set aside their differences to make this majority government by like a not significant margin. They've had control in UK politics for a long time now, but their power is clearly waning, which is why they had to make this coalition with these extreme right groups in the first place. And they picked the prime minister. They picked May before she got the axe. They picked Johnson before he got kicked out. They picked Truss. Um, so they have a sterling record, clearly.
Mm-hmm.
But the way that it works is that outside of general elections, they just have to basically come together and agree. And if they can't agree, it kind of effectively dissolves their majority control and they have to kind of start over. So it's in their interest to quickly find somebody to be the figurehead to prevent any sort of doubt from happening that they are still a coalition party here. Um, in the case of May and I believe Johnson, they held official votes of no confidence in the prime minister themselves because they didn't want to step down voluntarily. So they went through the official process to say, yeah, get the hell out. In Truss's case, they didn't do that. The day before she resigned, they held a vote on what I believe was her like tax plan for the coming year, sort of thing.
Okay.
And they were very clear it was not a vote of no confidence. It's just a pure coincidence that when they voted on her tax plan and summarily rejected it, she also decided to resign the next day.
That is the
So
sorry.
they didn't vote her out,
Yeah.
but they basically did.
That is the equivalent of saying, "Mommy, the kids were being mean to me on the playground."
Yeah, yeah. There's a really good clip from German news, TV news that was getting shared around of their coverage of it. And the leading is was up until she hadn't resigned at this point, but talking about just the absurd scenes that were going on inside Parliament in the wake of this vote. And it's really good clip because if you don't speak German, like majority of the world doesn't, you don't know what the hell they're saying until they get to the quote from one of the members of the British House where it's just like 10 seconds of German, fucking chaos, and then back into German. Because that was a direct quote where it was just fucking chaos in the British House. Oh, it's great. So she's gone.
Bye bye
Nobody
bye.
liked her. Her, like, genuinely, it seems that way. It's been a one disaster after the next. And the question, of course, is who replaces them? And it feels like we're in a backwards timeline right now, where no matter what country you look at, it feels at least almost like a concerted effort where nations across the world have realized that if they just put someone in power so shitty and inept that they make anyone else look good, people will just ask you to come back even though you were also a gigantic piece of shit. They're doing it in Brazil, where their former president, who was not broadly popular but wasn't a complete idiot, was prevented from running against Bolsonaro in the last election and is now running against Bolsonaro. Went to a runoff, so it's the old guy, or what is the new guy, same as the old guy,
Yeah.
right? They had it in Italy where their guy made it pretty damn far but didn't actually get elected. The Philippines elected the son of a fucking dictator who killed thousands of the Philippine people because Facebook has no morals and has no problem with misinformation spreading like the fucking plague over there. And now Boris fucking Johnson is being tabled to go back in as PM potentially of the British government.
You're fucking kidding me.
Literally 45 days is all it took for people to, I guess, forget how much of a gigantic piece of shit he was.
Dude, nostalgia kicking in kind of different nowadays.
Yeah, right. It's been pretty great seeing people on social media talking about it, particularly from like the American perspective, looking at this happening over in Britain. Everybody just being like, "Oh, damn! I guess that's what our politics look like to you guys."
Damn, dude.
It's just like, yeah,
Yeah.
basically.
I miss it when things were better.
Hmm. And there's like nothing to actually talk about. That's the hilarious thing. It's like Theresa May and Boris Johnson were in power for a long enough period of time. There was like clear things that you could point to in their career that was like, yeah, people liked this, people didn't like this. This was the reason why it came to a head. This is the reason why they were voted out. Boris Johnson's, of course, came to a head because of the bullshit that he tried to pull with the COVID, not following the laws that he was passing. Um, but with Truss, it was so brief that it's basically just like, yup, she came into power. Everybody hated everything that she said, and then we got rid of her.
Yo, I remember a time like that over here.
Mm-hmm. Hilariously, it's just, this is like the trivia side of it. Um, she is officially the shortest serving period the prime minister of the UK has ever had. Previous record holder was something like 187 days. But if you look more internationally, it gets more interesting. Here in the US, we had a president serve for less time.
Whom?
Look it up. But there was a president in the 1800s, William Henry Harrison,
Oh yeah.
who fell ill on the campaign trail, won the election, and then on his 32nd day of actually being sworn in as president, died in office of his illness.
I forgot about
So,
Harrison.
yeah, 31 days is our record.
Washington is proud of that record. I give you, I can guarantee you that. As long as we have the shortest term for a leader over the British, he's probably very happy.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's kind of up in the air. I don't know. I guess that's the ironic part. We are of course not British, so we don't really follow British politics that close. Out of everything, like bigger things like this that make its way over here. Um, but there is a number of candidates that are being put forward for who would be the next British Prime Minister that aren't Boris Johnson. And I very much hope that they don't pick Boris Johnson. If they do end up going with that route, it would be a massive embarrassment for them. Like, I know I hear it talked about in like Magic the Gathering when talking about like completely different scale, of course, but like when you have cards in a format that are banned and people want them unbanned, you have to weigh that risk against the possibility of like, okay, what if the card is still too good? The publicity of taking a decision you made, reversing it for a couple of months, then having to go back on that again is awful. And it makes you look like an idiot for making that decision in the first place. And that's like the closest comparison that I can make from my experience to them going back to Boris Johnson. Like, you had this guy once, you all agreed he was awful and should not remain in power, and you're going to put him back? Come on.
I don't see what the problem with that is, Kyril.
Yeah.
Let's go back
What's
to
the
the better
worst that can
days.
happen? Was he going
Yeah.
to hold a party in the middle of a pandemic or something? Who would do that?
There's no longer a pandemic, Kyril. What are you talking about? That's over.
I'm sure it's a complete coincidence why that coronavirus is still the second tab on the BBC's website. It's totally not because it's still happening.
No, that's government propaganda, dude. COVID ended when Biden took presidency. That was the deal, remember?
Yeah, yeah, right,
Yeah. Biden literally said, "I'm canceling COVID." And then all of a sudden we all got better.
right. All illnesses were cured.
Yeah,
Speaking of COVID, though,
yo.
we actually do have. There's going to be a number of these. This has been. There's some weeks that are stressful because of how awful the news is,
Mhm.
when there's like mass shootings mixed with uh court decisions or laws being passed that are like clearly human rights things, particularly with the war going on in Ukraine. There's been a lot of weeks like that where it drags and drags and drags. This week has been exhausting because of the mental gymnastics that you have to keep up with to try and like understand what the hell is going on in some of these things. They're not bad, and most of them are kind of nothing, but they're just so out there that it is tiring to understand what is happening. Uh, so bear with me here.
Okay.
The is this the eighth? The United States District Court, Western District of Louisiana, has issued. It's hard to really call what to call this because they didn't actually get asked to do this. Okay, so let's back up a bit. Actually, not a number. The Missouri Attorney General specifically filed a case with suit, I guess, basically requesting deposition of a number of White House officials, including Anthony Fauci, Jen Psaki, and FBI agent Elvis Chan, and a number of other government officials, requesting them to be deposed on a number of aspects that this attorney general describes as collusion with social media to suppress free speech.
What?
Yes, this was sent to a number of courts where it was in its entirety dismissed for the absurdity of it. The United States District Court, Western District of Louisiana, has granted an expedited preliminary injunction for these depositions to happen. Okay, which is like genuinely insane. Okay, this isn't like, oh wow, that's wild and crazy, but kind of expected for the conservative appointees and crap. This is like genuinely somebody who's drank their own Kool-Aid kinds of insane. It is hard to put into words. Do you want to take a guess at some of the examples of suppressed speech and how that speech was suppressed were?
God, we're talking about Louisiana?
No, this was filed in the court of Louisiana by a Missouri attorney general as it relates to actions taken by members of the federal government.
There's so much stupidity that can be encompassed by
Mm-hmm.
that. That it's not
It's
specifying
basically
anything.
all the stupidity. To be fair, it's a bit of a loaded question. You could say just about anything there, and you would be right, because it is everything.
You know,
You want some examples? I have some examples because he gave specific examples.
hit me with those specific examples because I was just going to say the stupidest thing ever and hope that was true.
You'd probably be close.
Okay.
The safety of voting by mail, election integrity, COVID lockdowns, masking during COVID, COVID being a lab leak, and my favorite, the Hunter Biden laptop conspiracy story.
So they're pretty much saying if you don't disagree with anything that motivates us politically, you are suppressing our free speech.
No, not even disagree. These weren't removed. The speech that was talked about here was still on social media. It just got flagged as misinformation. It
As
didn't
it
go
should.
anywhere. It was just, this is misinformation. Here's more you can read. And they're saying that that was enough to harm their free speech.
I think that's commentary on their free speech.
Mm-hmm. It is on its face absurd. And then when you actually look at the details, somehow even worse. And then when you really look into it, it gets better. Because for at least 3 of those, they started in the Trump administration. The Hunter Biden laptop thing was in October of 2020 when Trump was still president.
Yeah, that was like his big.
Masking and COVID lockdowns were in 2020 when Trump was still president. These are things that started when Biden and Jen Psaki and all of their White House weren't even in positions of authority yet. The election hadn't even happened.
So why we still care
So
about this?
that's a great question.
Like, what is the point of living a long, healthy life if you can't fucking move on from 2 years of bullshit?
It's amazing. It's like you would expect that, like Reagan would be rolling in his grave or something, but they probably just never let him get buried.
Dude, I'm convinced that they have like him stuffed at the RNC conventions and like people take their picture with it, but they can't post it on social media.
Here's an important piece of information. This was a decision made by the Fifth Circuit. If you hear something coming from the Fifth Circuit of Appeals, it's usually bullshit. or just absolutely insane. They're the most predictable appeals court in the US, absolutely rammed full of Trump appointees that will toe any line that they need to.
And how long are they going to stay in the Fifth Circuit? Just asking for a friend?
Until they pretty much die, basically.
And how old are they? Like, give me an average.
Not that old.
Fuck.
Yep. So that's yeah, it's something.
You know what something that is?
What's that?
Bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
Can I have some good news for once?
Good news. I don't have that.
Hell yeah. Thanks,
I so personally, I don't consider this kind of stuff bad news either. Um,
Okay.
it's the kind of thing that is so blatantly dumb, and we've seen this a couple of times that even the Supreme Court doesn't, right? Because they know at a certain point, if the government eventually stops functioning in its entirety for its people, the people will start to ignore the government. The Supreme Court knows that. Even complete fucking brainlets like I don't even remember their names anymore because they're so illegitimate at this point. But certain members of the Supreme Court aren't so stupid to understand the ramifications of actually siding with a case like this. You don't want the government to be able to be sued for any and everything they say. You don't want any individual to be able to be sued for every single word they say. There's a reason that we have, concepts like standing. We'll be talking about that later with the Biden student loan, various suits related to that. But there's a reason that we have these concepts in law to sort of weed out the obvious bullshit ahead of time. And just because a number of clearly rogue judges have strayed from that, they know that you don't want to fuck around with it too much because eventually it'll either bite you yourself in the ass or people are just going to stop listening to you. It's like what Andrew Jackson said, gigantic piece of shit of a president, but the Supreme Court ruled basically that the Trail of Tears was a clear constitutional violation. And his response was, I would like to see them come and enforce that decision.
Damn.
Which, awful person, pretty ballsy move, right? Like, he's not wrong. And it kind of put on display the skewed nature of the separation of powers, right? Only one of the three branches of government has all the military. So if the military and its generals generally agree with how the executive is using its powers or generally disagree with the decisions made by the court, say through the better part of a decade of them eroding their legitimacy by blatantly politicking from the bench rather than actually issuing decisions based on the Constitution, it only goes so far.
That it does.
So something like this is probably already doomed to fail, but it's still pretty fucking wild to see it get as far as it has. Hmm. There is some good news. I was wrong. Bannon's actually going to see the inside of a jail cell.
No way.
It's only 4 months, to be fair.
That's a
He
vacation.
was. It kind of probably is. But no, so for the average person, if the average person was put in the kind of jail cell that Bannon inevitably will be, yes. But these are the kinds of people that they are like the progenitor Karen, right?
I love that
Even a
title.
day. Like they are. They're like the primordial ooze that all other Karens are born from. They started it. It comes from their pores. Uh, a day, even with the most basic and bland restrictions, is going to be torture for some of these people. There's a really good thing from I can't remember his first name, the Belfort guy, the Wolf of Wall Street guy.
Yeah.
when he got charged and put in jail, he went to one of the really swanky federal prisons that the rich people go to. And he described it basically as a country club. And for someone like him, it probably was. But for someone like Bannon, people who are used to just doing and saying whatever they can, who are so inextricably linked with their social media followings and the followings of the people around them, just cutting them off from like that ego part of themselves, even for a little bit, will be damaging to them.
Reminds me of the fit Trump made when he lost his Twitter account.
Right? It's exactly that.
Yeah.
In the grand scheme of things, it didn't really do anything. But he sure as hell hated it happening.
Oh, I remember
So
that
in this
day
case,
well.
this was for Bannon refusing to provide testimony in the January 6th case. So in this instance, if Trump, like we're saying, if Trump does refuse to testify to the January 6th committee, something like this is basically what will happen. Whether he actually sees jail time isn't the question. But if he outright refuses to comply, they're going to go through the same steps here.
Yeah.
And they're sure as hell going to try and get him inside a jail cell. So we'll see.
Could you imagine Donald Trump in a jail cell? I just kind of want to know what
Mm,
that'd be like.
it'll be good. I
I,
think
I don't know, man. I
we
think
don't
he would
have any
start
news
eating
about
his
it
own
this
legs.
week, but the multiple suits that are ongoing in the state of New York that have had substantial amounts of evidence referred both to the IRS and the FBI and the DOJ in general seem, it seems impossible that that can't amount to something, assuming they're able to actually act on it, right?
Yeah.
It is so on its face incriminating. So I guess we should also mention that the because that did technically happen this week. The January 6th committee has officially formally subpoenaed Donald Trump for testimony and deposition.
Dun
So
dun dun.
it was only a couple days ago. Whether that actually goes anywhere will be another question. But it did happen. They officially did it, and that's pretty. It's not unheard of to have a president subpoenaed or a former president subpoenaed, of course, but it is certainly the next step that what this committee has been doing, what it's been building up to, is establishing the evidence through other testimony of who ultimately is culpable. So it'll be it'll be interesting, right? It'll be interesting.
Okay, so if you had to give a percentage onto how far we are in the January 6th committee, how far do you think we're at? Because I think we're past the halfway point by far.
I wouldn't, not yet.
Mm.
I mean, it on its way to what, right?
Yeah.
Like the actual physical acts that happened on January 6th are already long being taken care of, right? The people who were in the Capitol being destructive, trying to physically suspend the election process that was happening that day. They're already being prosecuted and are very like guaranteed at this point to see the inside of a jail cell for many years. There's been plenty of stories about people who've been charged, people who are being charged, people taking plea deals and ratting on each other. So, like to that end, the actual acts that happened on that day are being taken care of with as much swiftness as I think anybody can reasonably expect from the DOJ, honestly. Um, as for these less legally defined, sort of nebulous things, like is speech enough to count as like sedition or traitorous, whatever, right? Like, there's a lot of stuff that at least we, the public, don't know yet that would need to fall into place before I would say that we're over the halfway line. Because any decision is going to be appealed from here and here back, right?
Yeah.
I would say that we're at the halfway mark after all of the evidence has been clearly laid out against not necessarily a verdict one way or the other, but once they have all the evidence clearly laid out against Trump and Bannon and all these lackeys all the way down the chain, once they have that clear line of authority and who said what established, that's the halfway point. You know what was said. Now you have to fight them for the next 5 years to actually get them to see the inside of a jail cell. Maybe.
I mean, I don't think.
Because that's going to be a hard fight.
Yeah.
Because they're going to appeal as often and as vocally as they can.
Yeah. No, I agree.
So I would say probably like 40%, if I had to put a number on it.
40%.
40% is where I'd say we are now. Yeah.
Okay. I wasn't going as far as you're going with your estimate.
Mm-hmm.
My was just the investigation itself. Like, as far as we're getting, like,
yeah.
all
In
this
terms
stuff
of like
admitted.
the DOJ, from the DOJ's perspective, do they have enough to take Trump to trial? I would say they're probably 75%.
There you go.
They're not there yet, but they're pretty damn close.
What an interesting time we live in.
Yep. Yeah, it's different for sure.
Yeah. This time just built different.
Okay.
Yo.
Speaking of, let's talk the latest appeals ruling blocking Biden's student loan forgiveness plan. Okay.
Hell yeah.
So this is, to my knowledge at least, the third high-profile case of people trying to actually make a claim for standing as it relates to the student loan forgiveness plan that Biden has put forward through the Department of Education. The broad idea of standing, for those who might not know, is it's the concept that in order to sue someone, you have to prove that you were damaged in some way by that individual or that entity.
Mhm.
And being able to prove that you were damaged is broadly called standing. Someone has standing if they can prove that they were in some way damaged. And that has so far been the major hurdle that all of the other suits against the Biden administration have tripped over. The first major one was an individual who had student loans that applied or that was applicable for other federal student loan relief, that by accepting a $10,000 reduction to his loans would no longer apply or be allowed to apply for those other forms of relief. So he could demonstrate, if he was forced to take that $10,000, that he would serve to basically incur, in effect, some amount of additional debt. That was quickly resolved by the Department of Education, clarifying that it is an opt-in program. It will not be done automatically. You have to go through the process to apply, and then it will happen. So in that individual's case, they could choose not to apply, and they could continue on track for applying or for being able to take advantage of these other forms of loan forgiveness. In that case, they no longer could prove they had damages that would be incurred. They lacked standing.
Mhm.
There's another case that was also pretty quickly dismissed that was broadly claiming that as a taxpayer, that individual did not approve of how their taxpayer dollars were being spent, and that their taxpayer dollars should not be going to these loan forgiveness plans. That also was struck down for lacking standing. There's a long-standing precedent that as a taxpayer, you do not get to decide where your taxes go. That is just at a fundamental level inaccurate and not a valid claim to have been damaged. There's long established case law back to like I think the 60s and the 70s in particular, where there's a couple of notable cases that still dictate whether or not someone has standing today. Okay. In this most recent one,
Mm-hmm.
in the attorneys general of someone's got to have a list of it. Where did it go? It's like 6 attorneys general. Does it actually say here which ones it is? I'm trying to find a list, but I am not. There we go. Nebraska, Missouri, Iowa, South Carolina, Kansas, and Arkansas are suing the DOE, the Biden administration, whatever you want to phrase it as, under the argument that because their state tax dollars are in part funded through certain loan servicing programs in their state. By those loans and their debt being removed, they can no longer acquire state tax dollars through those venues from the loan servicing providers, and that they're being damaged, therefore, by that.
I
How does
don't.
that sound?
It sounds pretty shitty because
It is.
it
It's
essentially,
very dumb.
yeah, it's essentially saying you're taking away business that we would get, even though we have
Mm-hmm.
no responsibility in this matter.
Biden's plans skirted congressional authority and threatened the state's future tax revenues and money earned by state entities that invest in or service the student loans.
It's not like there's going to be more.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, absolutely. It doesn't. There's two parts of this, right?
yeah,
There is the Biden's plan skirted congressional authority, and then there is the future tax revenues and money earned by state entities.
yeah,
I have a feeling that the second half is like false on the merits, right? You of course can sue to stop someone, right? In the event that that action that they are planning to take could cause you damages. Say a private company threatens to bulldoze your house to make room for their parking lot, for their factory or something,
yep,
right? You can sue them to stop them. And it can be determined right or wrong. Were there agreements that were made ahead of time? Are they actually working under some sort of eminent domain system and they're a government contractor? Or are they just flat out wrong and they're not allowed to do that? Um, that would be an instance where something like that could make sense. In this case, I have a hard time believing that they're going to be able to, like, when it actually comes down to it, actually prove specifically the harm that they're going to incur here, just with how nebulous this is. It's like saying that we're being damaged because we no longer have the option to do this. You can still invest in state entities that service student loans. Student loans aren't going to be gone,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
They're not disappearing. This is a one and done kind of blip here. Um, and to that extent, it's not the only type of federal loan that exists. There's other sorts of loans or state loans that would still exist that could still be invested in and that tax revenues could be accrued by, right? So that part is pretty wishy-washy, but feels too vague to actually stand up to scrutiny. The other half of it, that Biden's plan skirted congressional authority, is just outright wrong. This is an argument that conservatives have been trying to make for a while.
yeah,
And if this does make it past this appeals court up to the Supreme Court, could have dire ramifications. Because the Supreme Court has indicated they would have no problem ruling on something like this that would basically it would be very destructive to how a modern government actually operates. Our Congress is strongly based on the ideas of delegation, that rather than having just Congress do everything, which would clearly be not feasible and take far too long, they can pass a bill that establishes an organization or a department. And then that organization or department can set policy based on the outlines given to them by their initial charter through Congress that gives them purview over certain areas. That's how we have the FBI, the DOE, the IRS. It goes on and on and on. It's how a modern government functions, because to go through every single detail on every single aspect of it would take so long that nothing would get done.
mm-hmm.
And that end, nothing getting done, is largely the goal of these sorts of movements. They believe that no, it's like the classic libertarian thing. It's all government overreach, right?
Yeah,
Except when they do it. But it's all government overreach. So the existence of these departments in the first place should be illegal. And to a layperson, or not even a layperson, a person who has their sanity, it's clearly absurd. It doesn't make sense. And this doesn't make sense either. Following 9/11, before 9/11, the Department of Education was established and given certain guidelines that they could work within. Following 9/11, that was expanded through the HEROES Act that gave the Department of Education the authority to discharge federally serviced student loans in the events of national emergencies. Coming back around to 2020 to 2022, COVID being a national emergency was valid ground for federal student loans to be discharged by that act. It went through Congress, it just didn't go through Congress recently, and they're trying to, for lack of any other word, lie about that fact to their own ends. So the idea that Biden's plan skirted congressional authority is wrong entirely as a concept. It didn't. It just happened a long time ago. Like, imagine if you needed to pass a new law every time you wanted to charge someone for murder. I feel like that's a really fitting example, right?
Yeah.
Somebody kills somebody and you want to charge them for murder, but you have to pass a new law to do that every single time. It would clearly not work. It would be wholly ineffective and nothing would get done. And worse than that, you'd have murderers out there on the street because of how long the process would take. It's a gigantic pile of shit. And everybody's collectively just like not quite sure how the Eighth Circuit of Appeals uh can do this. Because this was uh not actually appealed to them. A lower court below them said that they dismissed this for lack of standing. They said that these state attorneys generals in their states did not have the they weren't able to demonstrate that they were damaged by the Biden student loan relief. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
So they dismissed the suit for lack of standing at the district court level. And then this is an emergency injunction that stays that, but that doesn't do anything. So, on the one hand, the arguments that are being made are clearly wrong. And at the district court level, the judge involved with that said these are wrong. It's now at the appellate court level where they gave an emergency injunction that doesn't actually do anything, or at least doesn't do what they say it does. But then they are demanding, and part of this, that the Biden administration can't discharge any student loan debt until this court rules on the appellate's motion for an injunction pending appeal is granted. And it's just levels on levels of absurd malpractice, both from the initial attorney general's filing this to the appeals court granting, or I guess not even granting. It's hard to really describe it. It's like they're doing all new levels of legal gymnastics to justify their bullshit.
Well, yeah, dude. They gotta make those headlines. They gotta look good for on the headlines, dude. It doesn't matter about winning.
It is just wild that this is happening at all. Um, but that is the world that we seem to live in today,
You know,
where the absurd happens all the time.
there's like a lot of bullshit going on right now, and I think
Mm-hmm.
student loan forgiveness is not like the main issue that they should be
Yeah,
focusing on.
I'll say it is, I think, really interesting, at least here in Michigan, that we have three pretty major constitutional amendments on our ballot this year. And the one that I'm hearing pushed against the most isn't the one that makes abortion legal and part of our Constitution.
Whoa, 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 whoa! What one is that? Because all I get is Prop 3 stuff.
So I can look it up. I don't believe. Let's see,
I don't know if this
Michigan.
just means we're in different sides of Michigan and that's why, but
It very well could be.
yeah.
The one that I'm hearing about is constantly regarding the changes that allow. It's like who can vote.
Oh yeah. Okay. Prop 2. So
Yeah.
Michigan lore for everybody at home right now. We have three props on our ballots for midterms. We have Prop 1, which is about term limits and financial disclosures of state
Yep.
legislators, which
Yep.
is pretty cool. Prop 2, which is about voting rights. Um,
Which is also pretty cool.
yeah, I like it when people can
It's
vote.
yeah, it's the kind of thing that for me at least, it's just like, wait, we don't have that already. It's like stuff like you can vote if you're a service member abroad kind of stuff by mail.
Yeah, that's
And
the
it's like,
big
wait, we
part of it.
don't have that? Are you
Yeah.
kidding me? But yeah.
So this proposition constitutionally amends recognition for fundamental right to vote without harassing conduct, which is crazy. We don't have that. Um, require military overseas ballots being counted if postmarked by election day. Provide voter
Mhm.
rights to verify identity with photo ID or a signed statement, which I thought we
Yep.
had.
Yeah.
Uh, provide the voter a right to single application vote in the event of an absentee. Require state funded absentee ballot boxes and postage as well.
Mhm.
Provide election officials um, like conduct post election audits, which
Yep.
pretty cool. Require 9 days of early in person voting. Um,
Yeah. The post election audits one is the kind of thing that it sounds kind of like, oh yeah, why not? But they had this whole problem in Arizona where the Republican members of their state legislature kept trying to push for an independent third party audit.
yeah,
They were adamant about it, and this is trying to make sure that that doesn't happen, that any sort of government process stays within the government, because what was happening over in Arizona was like clearly an attempt to like just try and pull it in any other way that they could, like to bring it back to like the 2000 elections, to find hanging chads, to
yeah.
find anything that they could to make the vote more favorable to themselves.
And then the last amendment on the here would be require canvas boards certify the election results based only on the official
Yep.
records.
That is a measure that I believe is meant to stop like rogue electors
Yep.
from being accounted for. Basically it sounds dumb, but we have a dumb election system, I guess.
And then after that is basically reproduction freedom in America, Prop
Yep.
3. Well, for
Yep.
Michigan, for Prop 3.
Yeah. So it must just be a regional thing. I'm hearing a ton about Prop 2.
So Grand Rapids is pretty conservative. All things
Yeah.
considered, it's almost like we're in the fucking DeVos backyard or something.
Who
Um,
could imagine?
yeah. So all I see is Prop 3. There's a lot of things around here, and I fucking hate this ad because like it's so gross. Where they say Prop 3 is true confusing.
What?
Yeah.
It's only because these people don't understand basic science.
No, it's because they can't understand words that are more than 3 syllables.
Also true.
There's this one, and it's kind of crazy. They've been mailing this one out like around my neighborhood, which I cannot tell you how scary this is to me. It's like Prop 3, actually read it and tell if it makes sense. And like you open it up and it's not Prop 3. It's like a summary.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, so they just completely changed it?
So they give you like a summary of it and then they put in all that flowery language to make you feel
Oh
like you
man.
should be scared of it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So they took it and intentionally made it confusing and then pointed at the confusing thing and said, "Look, it's confusing."
Yes.
Even though that's not the actual thing.
It's
That's
like they
amazing.
put it into Google Translate and then translated it into a few different languages and brought it back.
Yeah. I am very lucky that at least in my county, we do have early voting and voting by mail. So I've already sent my ballot off. And I can guarantee you, like, no question, I've already voted on the damn thing. I've read all the proposals in the actual wording on the ballots. They're not confusing.
Yeah.
It's clear as day what each one is and what a vote either way means.
Yeah. I also find it hilarious how no one talks about Prop 1.
Well, yeah, I mean, Prop 1 is the kind of thing that we'll see if I can't imagine it doesn't pass, right?
Yeah, I feel like if you make
It,
any pass at Prop 1 for not being like certified, you're kind of identifying which part of the problem you are.
right.
Yeah. Only assholes wouldn't vote for a Prop 1. You can use that. If you,
Speaking of assholes,
yo,
do we want to let's finish up with last piece we have locally, at least in the US government. Um Lindsey Graham has officially appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court, asking them to intervene in a lower court order that has required him to testify before a special grand jury in Georgia that is investigating whether former President Trump and others illegally tried to influence the 2020 election in that state.
Go on.
So, I mean, that's kind of it. It's just literally the last option that he has. So you can see how very desperate this guy is. I would be very surprised to see if they actually interfere here. I don't know if, given that this is a state thing, right? That's the big thing with the current court cases that are going on in New York and Georgia and Florida to an extent, but that's also involving the DOJ. But primarily, or not primarily, particularly in New York and Georgia, is that these are state law issues. These are crimes that were committed by members of the federal government, but they're state crimes that they're being prosecuted for or involved in. So appealing to the Supreme Court shouldn't do anything, right?
I mean, last time I checked, the state court was a little different than that.
Yeah. If he was going to appeal to somebody, he would have to appeal to like the Georgia Supreme Court.
Yes.
But like, this is very much a Hail Mary and should completely fail without question, just because the U.S. Supreme Court doesn't have purview over matters involving state law between that state and individuals. You can't appeal something up to the Supreme Court just because you feel like it. There are still rules, you know?
You know, I was going to start appealing at like a lawsuit I was going to have towards the state of Michigan. You see, people aren't listening to our podcasts as much as they should, and that's directly hurting us. So I'm going to, you know, I'm standing for a lawsuit right there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
I can't see a single reason why that wouldn't go through.
Yeah, dude. So let this be a warning to everybody. Watch or be sued. Well, I'm sorry, you can't watch a podcast. Listen or be sued.
Oh, okay. So they're still trying to do this under the speech or debate clause of the Constitution, which is not how that works at all. You remember that?
No, I do not. Go on.
Okay, so there's a part of the Constitution that, in so many words, says that a member of Congress can't be sued for anything they say in the enactment of their congressional duties. So if you're arguing on the floor of Congress, you can't be sued for your speech there, regardless of what you say. That's the gist of it.
That's some scary ass
Graham,
shit. Yeah.
It is and it isn't. It's the kind of thing that needs to be so broad to prevent any attempt from curtailing that at all. Like, you can easily imagine a conservative panel, right, railing through an amendment that says abortion can't be talked about in Congress.
Mm-hmm.
And then you don't have to like actually ban abortion or unban abortion or do anything because you can't talk about it legally.
Yeah.
So having something that is so broad that all speech is protected is it's an unfortunate but necessary evil in order to make sure that speech remains open for everything, right?
Yeah.
However, Graham and his lawyers are trying to claim that all speech a congressman makes is protected speech, which is obviously not true. Like, just blatantly false. And that is where this has largely sat so far. It is not within a congressman's duties as a congressman to call state governments and persuade them to change the results of an election. So that is the justification that they're trying to use to get this to be seen in front of the Supreme Court. It's bullshit. It's already been shot down. But, you know, with our SCOTUS, you never know. They might throw a curveball.
Oh, boy, they've never done that before.
One more piece of pretty substantial news here is that Xi Jinping, oh God, Xi Jinping, president of China, actually not his president, but it doesn't really matter. He's their leader, de facto dictator at this point, will be serving a third term.
Yay.
He's definitely not a dictator, though. You know, you got to keep that in mind. He's not the next Mao because he said he's not, and that is clearly good enough, right?
I mean, did he swear on a Bible?
Oh no, God no.
Okay, that's good. That sounds like something Ma would do.
There's a couple other pieces here though that user on Reddit put over talking about more than just the surface level. Like obviously, uh, this was the inevitability that was going to come around with Xi Jinping. They got rid of their term limits in anticipation for exactly this, to allow Z to remain in power basically indefinitely. They have changed their public mentality as it relates to the Chinese government to basically have Z be a new founding father of their state philosophy. It's like, from their perspective, this is like their George Washington, but he's still in power, so they got to do whatever they can to keep him in power.
Sounds about right.
The other part of this is that um, the standing committee, which is basically like Z's cabinet, also had pretty substantial changes. Um, the most major one was that the former president, prior to Xi, was forcibly removed from the what we would call it, the chambers that their government operates out of, was removed by security from those chambers, basically at the request of Z. For he didn't stop them at least, right?
Yeah.
Um, and no one else did either, which is obviously bad. Generally, you don't so here, good comparison that was made to this was what bin Laden did with the Afghan government when the Taliban first came to power, where he basically went up in front of their politicians and started reading names off of a list. And if your name was read, you were taken outside the building and shot. Watching the footage of those sort of side by side, and they've both been circulating around as a result of the similarities to it, it is pretty staggering, the similarities to it, of these large parliaments of government officials, all of them making the most, like, no eye contact with anyone else at all, just like hoping, praying that their name isn't next as their colleague is taken out back to have who knows what done to
They're just going to go live on a farm, Kyril.
him. Yeah, it's completely fine.
Yeah.
But the major problem here, I don't call it problem, um, concerning element of these changes to Z's standing committee is that I'm going to read this list because it's effective summary of it. There is no clear successor for Z, which gives the clear implication that Z intends to go indefinitely in his current position until he dies, basically. There's always been a clear line of succession before because they had term limits before Z.
Mhm.
It's how modern governments function, and to prevent dictatorships from cropping up like this kind of is turning into. Uh, Former premier under Z, Li Keqiang, was removed. He was prior the number two of the government and was in favor of more economic liberalization, was seen as a pragmatist party member. With his removal, the government is expected to become more hardline. His replacement for premier is Li King, a similar sounding name, but very different. He oversaw the brutal Shanghai COVID lockdowns, a vocal Xi's cheerleader, potential yes man. Uh, Lee would vocally say when he disagreed with Z. This is not going to be the case with his replacement. Standing committee departments also include liberal reformers Wang Yang and Han Zhang. They're the only two people remaining on the standing committee are hardliners Wang Huning and Zhao Liji. The implications from this is the potential for a sort of run up for China officially taking back Hong Kong as part of China and potentially Taiwan as well. They have been posturing for decades to the retrieval again of Taiwan, but never actually doing anything. And Hong Kong has, of course, been much more overt as they have continued to exert their influence over the region. Um, Removing the more liberal, vocal, even though they're on the same team, people who would vocally say, like, hey, Xi, maybe that's a bad idea. Those people are gone now. And if Xi decides, I want Taiwan, there is less and less standing in the way of him trying to do that.
Sounds like he's taking a lot of inspiration from old Vladdy Putin.
Yeah, it could be. I don't know. It's hard to say, right?
Yeah.
Because Putin is not looking too good right now.
No, but, who in his position would be doing good right now? You can't tell me that anybody else in these exact same circumstances would be doing better right now.
Look, I won't say that. I will say it's very hard to find a time in history where things in Russia were good.
Truth.
Um, but yeah, this is like clearly pretty bad in terms of I don't know. It's I mostly uh feel bad for the people of China, right? Like that's the main thing is that it's a massive country, billion people, right?
Yeah.
And it's just a massive indoctrination state at this point.
It's
Human
more,
rights violations, economic, environmental violations.
I describe it more as just a business and the people are the product.
Kind of.
Yeah.
It's messed up.
Pretty messed up, dude.
Oh, interesting. I actually want to look this up real quick. This is could be cool. Wait for this to load. Apparently, the U.S. is sending financial support to the people of Cuba following Hurricane Ian.
That's a nice of us.
Yeah, that would be a real policy change. Maybe not a change, but I mean, it's good, right? Cuba and the U.S. aren't exactly allies, but that might go to mending some bridges.
Yeah, can't say we're the best of friends, but, always time to, make amends.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
let missile crises be missile crises.
All right. Do you want to talk about Kanye? Because I think we got to talk about Kanye
Kanye,
or Yee.
yes.
Yee.
I don't know where to even start with Kanye.
Has he gone full Prince and like officially changed his name to that, or is it just like I prefer to be called by sort of thing?
I
Do you
think
know?
he did try going full Prince, but everybody, the problem with Kanye, right? Well,
Yeah.
Yee in general is
The
that,
artist formerly known as.
yeah, the artist formerly known as Mr. West, um, is that he's already cemented such an image for himself as Kanye that we have Kanye-isms. So a name change like this so late in his game is going to be a very hard thing to pull off. That being said, I'm willing to just accept that he's trying to pull a Prince. Prince, though, had a really good reason for it. Do you know the reason why he went as the artist for a while?
I don't know.
So the record company he left had
Oh,
full
okay.
rights to the name Prince, so he changed
That
it.
makes sense.
Yeah,
That's really shitty.
isn't it?
We'll talk about this later, but there's a piece coming out over AI generated art and how one of the major AI generated art websites basically has started to progress into AI generated music. And there's a
Yes.
twist to that. I think we should. I'll look it up and see if I can while we're talking about Kanye here. But uh, well, we'll talk about it later. I don't want to give any spoilers. Let's talk about Kanye though, because goddamn, dude keeps taking L's.
The only W in his
The
life is West.
yeah, the smaller part of him getting bad news for Kanye this week is that the mother of George Floyd's daughter has filed a suit requesting $250 million after West made unfounded and allegedly damaging claims regarding George Floyd. Basically saying that he was on drugs was the short of it that I heard, and that was the result that led to his death, not the cop kneeling on his windpipe for what 8 minutes or whatever it was.
Yep.
So that's why he's being sued over that. Whether that actually goes anywhere is a completely different matter. Unfortunately, it probably won't because it's the kind of thing that's pretty nebulous, and those sorts of numbers and names are very headline grabbing. So people are going to be keen to sort of blow it out of proportions for what it really is. But it's helping to bring attention, excuse me, to the fact that it's not just anti-Semitism that he's spewing these last couple of days. There's been a lot of egregious stuff that he's been saying.
Well, yeah.
So
um, where do you even start with Kanye lately? Because I feel like the George Floyd stuff, as awful as it is,
yeah, it's like the tip of the iceberg.
yeah, the anti-Semitic remarks we went on last time, um, he's been getting like sponsorships dropping on his part as well because of this. I
Mhm.
just, I don't know, the White Lives Matter shirt.
Yep. Well, let's talk about that because the big news this week is that Kanye has apparently agreed to buy the conservative social media platform Parler
Yes,
for, I don't know if it's been disclosed yet, millions of dollars for sure.
possibly even billions at this
And an
rate.
important, a very key detail of this that ties back into the White Lives Matter thing, the White Lives Matter thing that he did at the Paris fashion premiere, was that at that premiere, he had a shirt with the text White Lives Matter on it, alongside an individual that most people probably don't know, who goes by the name of Candace Owens. Candace Owens is a conservative, I don't know what you call it. Uh, like what's the right word? Just like like one of the many conservative grifters, right?
Yeah,
Like I feel like that's an apt way of phrasing it. They don't seem to like really stand for anything other than what makes them money. And her husband, George Farmer, just happens to own Parler.
just
And
happens.
Parler as a platform just happens to be tanking lately.
I wonder
And it
why.
really seems like Candace Owens used her proximity to Kanye to basically bait him into purchasing the failing platform that her husband is the CEO of.
So I know Kanye and Elon have been becoming friends lately. So I
I believe it.
wonder if that was also an inspiration for this.
Maybe. Who knows, right?
Yeah.
It's wouldn't surprise me if that like started the thought, but I don't know. It's not great.
I only got into Kanye like in 2020. So like I'm a very new Kanye fan, so this is all scary to me.
Hmm.
Meanwhile, I have
It
a
has been really interesting seeing the response on like there because there's a Reddit for him, of course,
yeah.
his music, and seeing it pretty like not immediately shift, but noticeably shift from people just being like, it's just a one-off thing. Come on, guys, to just kind of being like, okay, what the fuck? Where even his like actual fans are starting to take notice and just be like, what the fuck?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So, I found that image I mentioned to you before the show when we discussed this. The image of the guys on the owner overpass saying "honk if you know Kanye is right about the Jews."
Yep.
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 Yep. This was in L.A. Freeway 405, which I don't know. I I I wouldn't call myself a diehard Kanye fan. I like his music, but is this like typical of Kanye West fans?
No.
Okay, cool,
I'm gonna go with no.
cool.
I mean, this whole thing is not typical of Kanye, right? There's a reason this is so startling because it is atypical. Oh.
So, where do you think we go from here?
I would like to talk about dance diffusion,
Oh, the AI?
the AI music thing. You heard about this?
Yes, I have. I'm not a
Okay,
fan of
I
it.
figured. I am not either. But a very important detail of it that is just a gigantic pile of bullshit is that Dance Diffusion, which is a music version of Stable Diffusion, AI art generating software made by the same company, has issued a statement that it is built on datasets composed entirely of copyright free and voluntarily provided music and audio samples. Because big music companies would sue the ever living shit out of them.
Oh, hell yeah.
And they know that they can do it with art using fucking anything to train their models on because individual artists, like drawing artists, pictures, don't have the same power to sue them in a meaningful way that the music companies do. And it is so opaque the way that they're doing this. And I've seen so many people try to be like, oh no, it's like it's the same problem with the NFT crap, right? Where you have people who are like the true believer types that are just like, it's not really, it is art, right? And you can do all these different things with it. And it's the same thing with the AI generated art, where the vast majority of people who interact with it just kind of go neat and then don't think about it again. There's people who genuinely hold that AI generated art is true art, so to say. But the problem
Can you use that term
is
for
that
me
the
one more time? My apologies.
true art,
No.
air quotes, I it is in a gray area, right? Because I think you could make an argument that a person interacting with a suite of software to the extent that a series of inputs that they give results in certain outputs, and that they know by changing the inputs that they give changes the outputs in certain ways, even if they don't have absolute control over it, it is to a degree predictable. Reminds me a lot of some of the like it's not I don't actually know the right terminology for it because I didn't study art, but it reminds me a lot of like the Jackson Pollock type artists that use intentional degrees of randomness in an otherwise controlled piece that builds to a larger whole. I do think some the potential exists for AI art to be true art in the same way that someone like Jackson Pollock, through thousands of brushstrokes and spatters, can take randomness and make a real piece of art out of it. Problem is that most people are taking a bucket of paint and dumping it on a canvas and saying, I made this, when all they've done is push a button. And that is clearly not art. There's no vision that went into it, no intent. It's just people fucking around with something because they can. And there
Yeah.
is a gray area between there, between when something goes from someone fucking around with software to someone doing something with an intention, trying to get a desired outcome. And that is not the majority of it. So I can appreciate, in the same way that someone like the NFT diehards can say, "Oh no, there's I can imagine these use cases where it makes sense to use NFTs for such and such, even if that's not actually happening." I can appreciate the mindset that they're trying to justify the flawed system. It doesn't. It doesn't justify it, but I can appreciate where they're coming from to come to the conclusion that they have. And it's just particularly scummy to see that the company itself is also aware of that, to the degree that they know if they did it, if they treated dance diffusion in the way they did stable diffusion, they would get the absolute shit suit out of them. So I can't wait for all. It'll be. I think it will be interesting in the same way that watching a car crash is interesting, right? Because I can really readily imagine an AI music generator being able to pick up broader concepts of timing, structure, things that are consistent across music. But I think it is going to be horrifying the minute that it starts to try to generate vocals.
So I'm of the opinion that there's no way. Uh, this is going to sound terrible, but it's going
Mm-hmm.
to sound pretentious to
No,
me.
just it's.
Yeah. Um, I think AI generated music could be
Mm-hmm.
art,
Yep.
but I think it will not be something worth listening to because
Yes.
when we have like music written on committee, it
Yep.
already turns into the most gentrified, bare bones, mass appeal bullshit. We
Yep.
kind of know that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it just it averages out to what the most common stuff is.
And I think a computer will basically do that just
Yep.
faster.
I agree.
Yeah.
I don't know. I describe it to like vocals in particular because with AI art as it currently is, it can do that broad concepts thing very well, where it can take like ideas that are represented across multiple other pieces and sort of smooth out into an average of that completely falls apart as soon as you start to look at the details. And I think that's going to be the same way, how broadly it'll be able to pick up certain things. But as soon as it starts to do specifics, it's going to fuck up. And it's going to fuck up badly. And it's just going to start spitting out gibberish that is unconvincing beyond a passing glance. But I guess with like TikTok and that kind of shit being so popular, maybe that's all you need is a glance for something to make a shitload of money,
I
right?
do think I like your term of the glance because
Mm-hmm.
I do feel like we because we're so saturated right now,
Mm-hmm.
glance culture is a big thing in art in general,
Yeah.
where you need to get like the immediate appeal of something right up front with you, um, in order to even convince you to like, it needs to hook fast,
Yep.
essentially, because nobody's going to glance it, which there's not enough time to make layers at that point. In fact, one of the things we'll probably be talking about later is a perfect example of glance culture.
Yeah. One thing that I'm genuinely curious to see how it kind of turns out in the end. You know, as a concept from engineering, right?
Yeah.
Having AI that can do this kind of stuff is interesting, you know? But always a piece that I retain. And I got brought up again for me this week talking about some of the changes that YouTube is doing with how they present ads and how they present resolutions of videos. And it comes down to compression. William Osman I can never remember where it actually is, but he did a really good piece where he just briefly talked about, I think it was like a Q&A thing where someone was just like, how do I make my videos better? And
Mm-hmm.
his number one thing was get good audio.
Yeah.
Your video can look like shit, but if it sounds like shit, or it'll look like shit and people will still watch it if it sounds fine. But if it sounds like shit, it doesn't matter how good it looks. No one is going to sit around for your bad audio. And it's true.
Mm-hmm.
The way that we perceive visuals is smoothed over a lot easier by the way our brains process it than the way that we pick up audio, where it's just kind of just like you hear what you get, you know? And I think they're going to run into the problem with this, with that being the problem, where you can take an AI piece of art and it has imperfections and nonsense and stuff that just doesn't make sense. That for certain in groups, they might like that the randomness, the chaos, the stuff that literally doesn't make sense. But for the average person, they don't want that.
Mm-hmm.
They want something that they can understand, something that is predictable, something that they can clearly point at and go like, oh yeah, this is that part, this is the other part. You know, when you look at a face, you have certain elements of the human face that you expect to be there. And AI art routinely fails to capture that when it starts to get into detail. And if they can circumvent that, it will be impressive. But given how tech focused people are, I don't think they are. They're going to be able to. They're going to do pretty much exactly what they did the first time. And they're going to end up having a much less popular product because even though the AI gets the broad strokes, it can't fill in the details enough to have it make sense. And then when we hear it, it's going to sound like gibberish. We're going to recognize that it sounds like gibberish because that's just how audio works. And it's going to sound like shit.
I also think that a lot of the charm to
Mm-hmm.
art in general is the story behind it,
Yeah.
that the humanity behind it. Like fucking Beethoven's Fifth, right? The dun dun dun
Mm-hmm.
dun 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 dun. Everybody knows that
Mm-hmm.
line. Many
Yep.
people don't know the story behind it, but it's partially why that piece has stayed all over these years, not just for the hooky da 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 da. Um, do you know the story behind the Fifth?
Not just from that. No.
Okay, so
Enlighten me.
enlighten you.
Yeah.
Okay, so the Fifth Symphony is a large piece in Beethoven's history because it's something he literally worked his whole life towards. He had like sketches for this all the way back in like the beginning of 1804. Um, there's a story that goes along with this. We don't know how far true this is, but we know some of it is true. Beethoven basically is going deaf. He is super sad. He is entering a very dark period of his life. He doesn't know why he's going deaf. We assume it's lead poisoning from the cheap wine he drank. And
Mm-hmm.
he is getting suicidal. He decides that what use is a deaf composer? I am just going to have to off myself because this is not a life I want to live. Um, how do you think Beethoven tries to commit suicide?
I had no idea. Given the time, like hanging, I guess that
He
would be like an accessible way. What do you do?
he goes to a fancy person's garden that he knows this fancy person is like sick. This
Yeah.
fancy person is not around too much. And he goes to their garden and he gets into a field position. And for like a day and a half, he just lays there in a ball in this person's garden, crying, sobbing, ready to starve himself and leave just a hopefully never have his body be found and like let the garden kind of take over his nutrients in his body. Um, so it was up to him to really find himself and pick himself up at that point. Uh, that is what the da 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 is supposed to be. It's knocking. It's fate knocking at his door
Mm.
to get him from this darkness into a better place. And not many people listen to the whole fifth, but the whole theme of it is
Yeah.
going from a dark place to a brighter place. And
Interesting.
yeah, I love the story of the Fifth Symphony. It's my favorite work by Beethoven.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I find that incredibly brilliant. Like as a parallel to this actual piece of music, and it's
Mm-hmm.
stories like that that
Yeah.
make art contextualized in humanity that really persist. And when you have a fucking AI just make that,
Yep.
what's the story behind it? Why should I even care? You know, it's
Yeah.
going to be nice at a glance, but there's nothing to keep coming back to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Thank you. I know a lot of useless Beethoven knowledge.
Right. Let's talk about a couple of movies before we wrap up here.
Cool. Do any of them
So
have
I have,
Beethoven in there?
I don't know. One might,
Oh shit.
but probably not.
Okay.
Um, let's talk. Let's talk about the Rock in the Room.
I love that
Black
title.
Adam.
Yes.
Black Adam. Oh boy, this is a divisive one.
Apparently.
I gotta pull this up again. I gotta back to Twitter. A good piece from somebody making a comparison to Seinfeld for it that was very apt. Where did that go? Give me 1 second. I can find this. It
You can
wasn't
find
that
it.
long
I
ago.
believe in you.
Okay. So, a person said, I feel like the critics who gave Black Adam low scores are the kind of people who sit around drinking wine while listening to fancy music and saying that movies are art. And somebody quote tweeted that with a two panel from Seinfeld, with Seinfeld asking Kramer, are you reading my VCR manual? To which Kramer replies with, well, we can't all be reading the classics, Professor Highbrow.
Jesus.
And that seems like a pretty good example of what's going on with Black Adam here, where it is not a good movie, right?
Hmm.
And we've had quite a few. I think quite even like in the Marvel space, there's been quite a few movies that have fallen into this part, where when you really sit down and look at them, structurally, writing wise, performance wise, they aren't great. They're not good movies, but they are entertaining, and sometimes that's all you need.
Yeah, I think that's like the only defense for Marvel movies like these last few years since Scorsese went off on them. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not gonna lie. I've been following this because I've been thinking it's super funny how Dwayne the Rock Johnson's been advertising this movie as like a
Yeah.
badass superhero movie. But when I think of The Rock, I don't think badass. I think cartoony.
Mm.
Yeah. Overall, though, I am surprised at this movie being existent because it never felt like it was going to be a full movie to me. But what do I know?
It's such a weird way to take it.
Yeah.
I would have never, from first hearing, like even the title, it is Adam, clearly an individual.
Hmm.
Um, but it's fucking like another superhero ensemble type movie for some reason. I just can't get over that. It's just such a weird decision.
I don't know what to make of this movie because I know very little of the character of Black Adam.
Have you seen Hobbs and Shaw?
No,
Okay. Do you know Dwayne Johnson's character in the sort of Fast and the Furious movies?
I have not seen a single Fast and the Furious movie.
Okay, I would recommend seeing Hobbs and Shaw.
Okay.
It is wildly entertaining in its absurdity. It is just like peak summer blockbuster schlock, and it's all the better for it. It is genuinely fun, and you can tell the people involved with it had fun making it. I would have hoped that more filmmakers could see films like that and just kind of let Dwayne just sort of be himself because he's a genuinely charming and funny guy.
Oh, I'm sure.
And it seems like they didn't do that here. They tried to force him into this. darker, kind of boring character, and it was the worst for it. And it still probably has a couple of quippy one-liners and some visually appealing CGI and action sequences, but it lacks something clearly that's holding it back from being just good. Yeah, here we go. Here's actually a really good part. In the sea of negative reviews on Rotten Tomato, one man sees the point. The film ultimately overloads us with so much amazing nonsense that we sort of give up and give in. Which is a bit depressing, but also like, yeah, you can like bad movies.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like
Yeah.
Black Adam to me just seems inoffensive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would agree.
This strikes me as the edgy kid's favorite superhero movie.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. DC's latest effort, Black Adam avoids making screenplay decisions and choosing its own style and bets on spectacular yet thousand times seen action sequences. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it'll probably make seven or nine figures in the box office.
It's already made 140 million.
Yeah. There we go. Budget achieved.
Nope, the budget was
No?
195 million.
Oh.
We're,
Well, it'll get there, I'm sure. This is
yeah,
only opening weekend, right? Yeah, it's only opening weekend. It'll be fine.
got plenty of time.
I I hope I will be very interested to see this once it's available to stream. I don't want to pay any extra money to see this garbage. But I would hope that with having, Dwayne Johnson as the lead, it even being darker and edgier, it has some of the charm and lightheartedness that he has become known for in recent years. Because that is really what a lot of the DC movies have been failing at. And it feels like they kind of put all their eggs in the Ezra Miller basket that, well, let's just say didn't go so well.
It's because he's young.
Yeah, he's just these crazy kids, kidnapping people, committing assault. Oh,
Jesus. I wouldn't be surprised if they go up to Ezra and they're like, Ezra, I need you to go out. I need you to go and get as much publicity as possible for the Flash movie. And Ezra just took that as an excuse to go full on Grand Theft Auto.
yeah. But yeah, this is a very divisive movie. I'm waiting to see some of the less traditional media reviews for it because I haven't seen any like YouTube type reviews. I
Mhm.
trust the Marvel YouTube reviewers more than the traditional reviewers at this point because they can at least kind of appreciate things in more than one context because they're able to review it in a less objective way, right?
I do think that there is this movement in criticisms right now where
Mm-hmm.
you have a lot of critics trying to hype themselves up as more than they actually are.
Mm-hmm.
And they're trying
Yeah.
to use that as a method to give them more credibility on like, oh,
Yep.
I'm an actual critic, thank you very much. Instead of like, I don't know. We are past the
They
time
all
of
want to be
Roger.
Roger Ebert.
I was about to say they're past the time of Roger Ebert.
Yeah.
Roger Ebert actually
Yeah. Yeah.
enjoyed movies and he would take anything at face value. I
Yeah.
think a lot of critics nowadays are looking to, boost their own brand by
Mm-hmm.
being not your average critic, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, but they do it in the same way everyone else does.
Well, I
You
know,
know.
but I mean, like, when you're like a traditional
But
critic and you
yeah,
have to like use the printed word versus like YouTube critics,
sure.
I'm thinking they're analyzing their audience as something more than a YouTube watcher. So
Damn, it's the print media film critic that hates all the action in Marvel movies. Next thing you're gonna tell me they're a straight white male from New York too.
nah, dude, they're actually from Chicago this time.
Oh damn,
Yeah,
real curveball.
they're a millennial media critic. Thank you very much.
How tragic.
You want to check out their YouTube channel with like only 26K subs?
We do have one more film coming out this weekend, or
Ooh,
not this weekend, but it's early reviews are in for it. Mass wide release is next week.
okay.
It is called Till.
What that?
It is a historical biographic, I guess you could say. They call it a drama, and it maybe is like a little bit dramatized, uh, but it is a biographic piece about the story of Emmett Till from the perspective of his
No.
mother.
Oh.
It is currently. Have you seen the numbers for it yet?
No, please tell me.
99%,
I
both
mean,
critic and audience.
if you're going
Audience on a movie about Emmett Till is at 99%.
I stand by. If you're going to make a fucking movie about Emmett Till, you better make it a damn good movie.
It apparently is.
It needs to
People are
be.
concerned for it because they have the same reservations, but reviews are glowing, and there's not really another way to put it.
And the kid that plays Emmett Till's adorable. That sucks. Why?
Till is a quintessential good for you movie, but it is also a good movie, rich with detail and beautifully directed. Sometimes the love between a mother and son is so strong it doesn't die even after death. That's what audiences will see here. That's what they'll take away, a love and strength that endures.
I
A film that offers a stinging historical reminder of America's history of racial injustice at a time where some are seeking to prevent that history from being taught.
This is
So yeah,
Oscar bait, but I'm up for it.
probably is,
Yeah.
but it's like the right kind. It is Oscar bait by not just being provocative,
Yeah.
but also good.
Like
It
this
seems.
I want this to win awards and I haven't even seen it yet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you have to keep in mind, Emmett Till is to this day in like it's hard to appreciate that just how racist people still are. That the plaque dedicated to him is still vandalized
No.
annually. Yeah,
No.
to this
No.
day. It is like that is where we still are as a culture, at least in those areas. And I don't even say that because I don't think it is contained to those areas. That's just how we are as a culture. There are still monumentally shitty people out there. So Oscar bait as it may be, it is encouraging to see that it is also just a good movie.
And I don't want to
Right.
like say that Oscar bait is an insult or anything
Mm-hmm.
bad about it as much as I'm feeling it. This is going for an Oscar.
I hope so.
Yeah.
I would I don't okay, I don't want to say that yet. I appreciate the message that the movie is trying to do from a broader perspective. I do need to see it though, still, of course. And I
Yes.
would look forward to seeing this. This is the kind of movie that I would like to see in theaters, and I will probably try to see it in theaters if I can, because it just seems like a well-made movie. You know, it's really rare to see critic and audience scores that close together.
Can't wait for the review bombs.
So we'll see. Yeah, we'll see.
Well, you know they're coming.
I'm sure they will, but I hope not. It is heartening to see that it hasn't happened yet.
Well, I don't think many people know about it yet. But you remember, you heard it here first on the
Mm-hmm.
Two Schmoes Show.
Yeah, guess so.
And if you fucking
Shit.
review bomb this movie, I'm going to kick your ass.
Okay.
What's up?
One last thing.
Hmm.
Have you seen the I don't know what you want to call this? You know Trombone Champ?
Yes, I'm aware of Trombone Champ.
Have you seen the custom tracks people have been making for it?
You can make custom tracks on Trombone Champ.
You can make custom tracks for Trombone Champ.
Oh God, no.
It's excellent. I'll send you some after the show is, but I highly recommend them. They are exactly as dumb as I would hope they'd be.
I'm already imagining Megalovania from Undertale on there.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
I think the Devs might have put that on their own.
Jeez.
See, there was one really good one that I sent to another Discord. That one, but it was excellent. Snake Eater, yes,
Whoa, whoa, whoa! I just learned something about Till.
yeah,
It was a Kickstarter project.
really, that's cool.
Yeah, it's a fully funded Kickstarter project. It looks like. I did not know this was even a thing.
Is that I guess I have to look it up. I know that there is both the current movie and there was a short film that came out before it.
I just put the one that
See,
I was linked to on the
that is
IMDb.
definitely very similar. Go back to the page here. Updates page. There's an updates page.
I
This
went.
is the same. Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay. So they apparently this is back in August. Our positions paid off, and in conjunction with our friends at MGM Orion and the wonderful director Jinyai Chukwu, Till is finally completed. Hopefully, you have seen our recent updates, including the first teaser poster, trailer launch, and the announcement that Till will premiere at the New York Film Festival in October, which is what just happened. Awesome. That's really cool.
that is cool. That is like the first Kickstarter project I've heard of in a long time.
Yeah. Kickstarter is actually pretty healthy still. It's just not nearly as viral as it was before.
Yeah, I get that feeling.
They've kind of worked the kinks out to a large degree, where particularly in like the tabletop gaming stuff, people just kind of they've gotten the people who are making the Kickstarters understand the actual limits that they're working with now, and the people receiving them know that it's probably going to be like a year or more past the actual date before something actually arrives, given the myriad of other factors going on with it.
Yeah, like this Till movie looks like it started in 2015.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a long time.
That's really cool.
Yeah. Apparently, you can go kickstart a Cowboy Bebop role playing game.
Send you another trombone jam track here.
Oh no, don't.
They're excellent.
That game is
You
cursed.
It's so amazingly cursed. I can't find it now, but there's one for like the 20th Century Fox opening.
No.
Yeah. It's fun. It's a stupid game. But I'm glad people are treating it exactly as seriously as it treats itself.
What I'm happy about is that we have a meme game again for the first time in years. Because like I feel like ever since COVID, there's been a lot less meme
Yeah.
games. Like Among Us was around for a bit, but
Yeah. It was from pretty well before COVID though. It had been around for a while. It just blew up.
yeah, exactly. It
Same
was
with
like,
like Fall Guys.
mm,
Yeah.
yep,
All right, that's all I got.
cool.
Anything else to cap off?
No, I'm just reacquainting myself with Kickstarter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually have a couple of Kickstarters that are in the process. One of them for a what they actually call it. It's like a deck box thing
Okay.
that was done as a collaboration with the one of the Magic YouTubers working with a like actual games supply company, and that was the Kickstarter was like the way, and I think that's how a lot of them go, where you have smaller groups working with already established bigger groups, so you're not going completely from scratch. they were just making basically a variant of a product that they already have to be in exclusive colors and sort of kickstart this unique design that wouldn't be as broadly successful as a mass market product release. Stuff like that.
That's cool.
I think that's why a lot of the tabletop games tend to be successful as well, because so much of it is, if you're making a board or pieces that make a custom board, all of that is relatively established tooling at a factory. You're just changing out the ink and the patterns.
Yeah.
So you can take something very new that plays in its own way and make it from established parts that this company is already making. And because you're establishing the rules that don't necessarily need that many unique pieces, you can pump it out relatively quickly.
I do find it very dangerous to be an adult with disposable income on Kickstarter now.
Oh yeah. Yeah. The other thing is that the prices on average have gotten a lot higher. That's the other big thing.
Well, it's
You don't
almost like they
have
know what they're doing now.
Exactly. You don't have nearly as many things. It's just like, give us what the actual retail price for this thing would be, and you can get one. It's you can see that people have understood that it costs money to make things when you're doing one-offs.
Yeah, just a little. Just a
Who
little.
would have guessed?
Yeah. Well, in the meantime, everybody, I'm going to get lost on Kickstarter. I'm the Infamous Orion, and I've been a Schmo.
I don't know, but I've been a schmo.
And this has been the Two Schmoes Show.